The alarm clock beeped at 6 in the morning, as usual. I fumbled for the button and opened my eyes, staring up at the ceiling of my small bedroom. Today was my 22nd birthday, but it didn't feel like a celebration. Just another Tuesday at the end of May, with the only difference being that I was taking the first day off from the insurance company call center in 3 years. I sat up on my bed, stretched, and glanced at an old photo on my dresser, the only picture of me smiling for real. In the picture, I'm 8, with Grandma Esther standing next to me, holding a small cake with a lit candle. I remember that day. Grandma sneaked me out of the house, telling my parents we were going to the library. Instead, we spent the day at the amusement park, eating cotton candy and riding the carousel. Esther died 4 years ago, and since then birthdays have just been dates on the calendar. I sighed and stood up. 7:05. I had 30 minutes before breakfast. My parents kept to a strict schedule, even on weekends. Breakfast at 7, lunch at 1, dinner at 6. Being late was punishable by my mother's cold contempt and my father's silent disapproval. I took a quick shower and put on jeans and a plain white t-shirt. I combed my brown hair into a neat ponytail. My makeup was minimal mascara and a little lip balm. Anything more colorful would have elicited disapproving comments from my mother about cheap looks. At 5:55, I went down to the kitchen. Violet Paxson was already at the stove, flipping toast. Her posture was as impeccable as ever. Her short, ash-blonde hair styled hair to hair, her face the perfect day's makeup, even though she had a normal day's work in the accounting department of a construction firm. "Good morning, Mom," I said softly. Violet nodded faintly, keeping her eyes on the toast. "Breakfast is almost ready. Father will be down in a minute." I silently took out the plates and began setting the table, trying not to make too much noise. Eustace Paxson didn't like loud noises in the morning. He didn't like them at other times of the day either. At precisely 7 o'clock, his father entered the kitchen, a tall, thin man with balding hair and permanently compressed lips. He nodded to my mother and me and sat down at the table, unfolding the newspaper. The only deviation from the rules of etiquette that my mother tolerated. "Good morning, Dad," I said, pouring him coffee. He hummed from behind the paper, which meant, "Heard and noted." Breakfast passed in the usual silence. I mechanically chewed my toast with jam, thinking about the day ahead. I hadn't planned anything special, maybe go to a bookstore or sit in the park with a book. Simple pleasures that rarely fell through in my busy work schedule. "You're not dressed for work today," my mother suddenly remarked, sipping her coffee. "Why?" I felt my shoulders tense. I'd prepared for this conversation, but I still felt the familiar chill of anxiety. "I took the day off. It's my birthday today, and I've got a lot of time off." I tried to speak evenly, without a challenge in my voice. My mother slowly set the cup on the table. My father put down the paper, and his gaze became wary. "A day off?" Violet asked in the tone she used to talk about tax audits. "When did you decide that?" 2 weeks ago, I answered, trying not to look away. I'd talked about it. I don't remember talking about it," my mother cut me off. "And since when do you make decisions like that without consulting us?" I took a deep breath. I had mentioned the day off, but as usual, my parents had ignored it. Another birthday came to mind, my 16th birthday. I dared to invite 2 classmates for tea after school without informing my parents in advance. My mother made such a scene that the girls never spoke to me again. "You only think about yourself, about your own desires. Did you think about the fact that we had to make treats right away?" she shouted then, even though I had baked simple cupcakes myself. "I'm 22 years old, Mom. I'm entitled to take a legal day off." 22, Violet snorted. "And you're still living with your parents because you can't afford to rent a place on your salary as a cameraman. And after that you're talking about rights?" I felt my cheeks start to burn. It was a topic that came up all the time. Every time I brought up the possibility of moving, my mother reminded me of my low salary. At the same time, she strongly objected to changing jobs or getting additional education. "You have no aptitude for a serious career, Leona. You're lucky you got hired at this call center in the first place." "I'm saving money," I said quietly. "How much have you saved in 3 years of work?" my mother asked wryly. "Enough for a down payment on a 1-room apartment, or at least a month's rent for a decent room?" I didn't say anything, I did save, but the amount was ridiculously small. Most of my paycheck went to my parents for room and board. It had been my routine since my first day on the job. That's what I thought. Violet smiled victoriously. When you're on our payroll, you'd better be able to make your own plans. I'm paying your rent, I countered, feeling a rare wave of protest rising inside me. And it's my birthday. I wanted to spend it not at work, answering calls from disgruntled customers. A birthday is just a date, my mother cut me off. No reason to break work discipline. I, for one, never take a day off on my birthday. Because your birthday's on Sunday, Mom, I said. Violet stood up abruptly from the table. That's it. Now you're being sassy. Oh, that's fine. That's just fine. You're living on the dole, working a cushy job, and now you're being mean to your parents. I'm not being rude, I'm up too. I just wanted one day to myself, one day in a whole year. For what? Dad intervened, folding the paper. To do nothing, or to hang around with dubious friends? I don't have shady friends, Dad, I replied tiredly. I hardly have any friends at all, in case you haven't noticed. And whose fault is that? Mother retorted. We gave you all the conditions for a normal life, a roof over your head, food on the table, and instead of thanking us, you throw tantrums over nothing. I closed my eyes for a second. Another memory came to mind. I was 13, and I'd gotten an A on my final math test, a subject I was struggling with. I showed the result to my mother, hoping for praise. And what do you want? A medal, Violet asked then. Other kids get excellent grades all the time, not just once a year. I'm not throwing a tantrum, I said quietly. I just wanted to celebrate my birthday. Celebrate? My mother theatrically shook her hands. What did you do to deserve a celebration? What kind of accomplishments should we be celebrating? Working as a call center operator? Or maybe your inability to budget? Violet, my father said warningly, but it was too late. No, I want to know, Mother raised her voice. What have you done in your life to warrant special treatment? Your cousin was already a receptionist at a clinic when she was your age. And you? 22 years old and no ambition. All you know how to do is complain. I felt a lump in my throat. Comparisons to Cousin Darcy were my mother's favorite weapon. Darcy, Aunt Pris's perfect daughter, was a standard I could never reach. I'm not complaining, I tried to say calmly. And I don't want special treatment. I just wanted one quiet day. Oh, she wants a quiet day, Violet said in a sarcastic falsetto. Why don't you bake a cake too, and put up balloons, and then sing happy birthday and clap our hands? Mom, please. I felt like I was going to cry, and I couldn't let that happen. The tears only added fuel to the fire of my mother's anger. Don't mom me here, Violet cut me off. I can see right through you. You're just looking for an excuse to get out of work. And then you wonder why you don't get promoted. With that attitude, you'll spend your whole life in the lower ranks. My thoughts were racing frantically. Part of me wanted to just apologize and go to my room like I usually did. But today, something inside resisted that familiar scenario. Maybe it was the picture of my grandmother I was looking at this morning, or the fact that the night before I'd been on the phone with Merritt Holloway, my only real friend, who had recently moved to live apart from my parents and was now constantly urging me to do the same. I'm not shirking work, I said firmly. My numbers are great, and my boss offered me the day off when he found out it was my birthday. That was true. I never took sick days, was never late, and had one of the best customer satisfaction ratings in the call center. My immediate supervisor, Tamsin Farrow, even talked about a possible promotion to senior operator. The supervisor suggested it. My mother pretended to applaud. What an honor. He probably just wanted a break from you. Violet, the father intervened again, but his wife ignored him. Do you realize what it looks like? She continued. A 22-year-old girl who should be building a career takes a day off because of a birthday. Kindergarten. When I tell my coworkers about you, I feel ashamed. At those words, something clicked in my head. Ashamed. My mother was ashamed of me. Not proud, not supportive, but ashamed. And she's always been ashamed as long as I can remember. I'm shaming you, aren't I? I asked quietly. By existing? Don't be so dramatic, Violet snapped at me. I'm talking about your infantile behavior. I'm talking about the fact that at your age, you need to grow up and stop clinging to children's parties. This is not a children's party. It's a regular day off, which I'm entitled to take. Right? The mother was furious. You don't know anything about rights and responsibilities. If you were really an adult, you'd think about the future, not your immediate whims. Mom, it's one day. I felt something new growing inside me, not the usual resignation, but a deafening irritation. One day in a whole year, and I don't understand why it's causing such a reaction. Because we see where it leads, Violet exclaimed. Today you take a day off without consulting us. Tomorrow you start coming home at midnight, and then what? Bring some bum and announce that you're getting married? I felt myself blushing at the absurdity of these accusations. My personal life was almost non-existent, precisely because of my parents' strict control. I just wanted one free day, I repeated, feeling that the conversation was going somewhere else. Free from what? My mother persisted. From responsibility? From adulthood? From all this? I couldn't stand it, turning my hand around the kitchen. The constant rebukes, that no matter what I do, it's never good enough for you. There was a ringing silence. Violet turned pale, then her face flushed red. Is that how it is then? She said icily. We raised you, fed you, clothed you, educated you, and now you say you're not happy with us? I didn't say that, I said tiredly. I just wanted one quiet day to myself. You're only embarrassing us, Mother suddenly shouted, banging her palm on the table. With your ingratitude, with your selfishness, get out! What? I couldn't believe my ears. You heard her! Violet was breathing hard, her eyes flashing with lightning. If you're so unhappy with us, if you don't like our rules, get out! Go and live your life as you want. I looked at my father. Eustace sat with his lips pressed into a thin line, then silently stood up and pointed toward the door. It was as if the world had slowed down. I looked at my parents, and for the first time I saw them without the usual veneer of childish fear and submissiveness. My mother was a petty tyrant, my father a silent accomplice. For years they stifled in me any independence, any attempt to show character, and now they were kicking me out of the house for daring to take a legitimate day off on my birthday. Okay, I said quietly. I'll go. Violet didn't seem to expect that answer. She'd obviously expected tears, apologies, and promises to make it up to me. What? She asked again. I said I was leaving, I repeated, surprised at my own calm. Give me half an hour to pack. Without waiting for an answer, I left the kitchen and went up to my room. My hands were shaking slightly, but my mind was unexpectedly clear. I pulled my backpack out of the closet and began methodically putting away the essentials. Underwear, 2 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, some makeup. Then I took my grandmother's picture off the wall, wrapped it in a t-shirt, and put it on top. Papers, phone, charger, some cash, which I hid under the mattress. All my possessions fit into one backpack. When I got downstairs, my parents were still sitting at the table. My mother was defiantly flipping through a magazine, my father pretending to read the newspaper. I stopped in the doorway, not knowing what to say. Say goodbye? Promise to come back? I wasn't sure I wanted to come back. I'm leaving, I said at last. My mother didn't look up from her magazine. Sure, make a drama out of it, like you're really leaving for good. You'll be back tonight when you realize there's nowhere else to go. She didn't believe I was really leaving. To her, it was just another scene that was supposed to end with me repenting and getting back on track. My mother never took me seriously. Maybe she was right. I had nowhere to go. But something inside me resisted the thought of going back. Goodbye, I said, and walked out of the house I'd lived in all my life. Once outside, I was confused for a moment. Where to go? My first thought was of Merritt. We'd been friends since childhood, but we'd rarely seen each other for the past few years. Our parents didn't approve of our friendship. The mailman, my mother said. She hasn't even finished college. What kind of example is she setting for you? I was always surprised by this arrogance. Violet herself was just an accountant for a small construction firm, and my father worked as a park ranger. Merritt rented a small apartment 3 blocks from my house. She always started work early, but today was her day off. I remembered that because we'd arranged to call in the evening. I pulled out my phone and dialed her number, walking farther and farther away from my parents' house. "Leona?" Merritt's sleepy voice sounded surprised. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" "I got kicked out of the house," I said, surprised at how calm my voice sounded. "Can I come to you?" "What?" Merritt sounded worried. "Of course you can come. I'll be waiting. God, what happened?" "I'll tell you when I see you," I replied. "I'll be there in 10 minutes." I walked down the streets of Cedar Lake, familiar from my childhood, and for the first time in a long time I felt not the usual anxiety, but a strange relief. It was as if a huge stone that had been weighing on my chest for years had suddenly disappeared. Yes, I didn't have a plan. Yes, I had no idea what I was going to do next, but somehow that uncertainty seemed more appealing than returning to a house where I'd never been accepted for who I was. Merritt's apartment was on the second floor of an old house with peeling paint. As I climbed the creaky stairs, the door swung open, and I saw my friend in a stretchy t-shirt and pajama pants, disheveled from sleep. "Oh my God, Leona." Merritt pulled me inside and hugged me tightly. "What did those monsters do this time?" I cried. For the first time in this whole crazy day, the tears finally broke through. Merritt stroked my back, whispered comforting words, then took me into the small living room and sat me down on the worn couch. "Tell me," she said, handing me a cup of hot tea she'd made while I washed up in the bathroom. "What happened?" And I did. About the day off for my birthday, about my mother's reproaches, about my father's icy silence, how I'd been kicked out the door for one single attempt at independence. Merritt listened without interrupting, only shaking her head and occasionally cursing quietly. When I finished, she took my hand. "You know what, Leona? Maybe it's for the best." "What do you mean?" I looked up at her with tear-stained eyes. "In the sense that you're finally free of them, from their control, from their constant rebukes. You can start living your own life." "But how?" I put my hand around my backpack. "I don't have anything." "You have a job," Merritt reminded me. "And you have me. Stay here as long as you need to. Together, we'll figure something out." "I can't sit on your neck," I started, but Merritt interrupted me. "Stop it. You know I've been living alone since Edric went to Portland. I'd have more fun with a roommate. We'll split the rent in half when you get back on your feet." I looked at my friend, and I could feel something new growing inside me. Not fear of the future, but determination. "Thank you," I said quietly. "I don't know what I would do without you." "What all abandoned kids with bitchy parents do," Merritt grinned. "Survive and learn to fight back. Happy birthday to you, by the way." She pulled a small cupcake from the refrigerator with a single candle, just like the one Grandma Esther had once had. I smiled through my tears. "How did you know?" "I always remember your birthday, silly. Make a wish." I closed my eyes and blew out the candle. The wish was simple, never to go back to that house again. But inside, I was already thinking that leaving wasn't enough. There had to be something else, something that would make my parents realize what it was like to have someone else control your life. "What are you thinking about?" Merritt asked, looking at my face. "You look so determined." "I'm thinking that it's time to take action," I answered. "And I know where to start." I woke up to the smell of freshly brewed coffee. I stared at the ceiling for a few seconds, trying to figure out where I was. Then the events of yesterday came in a wave. The birthday party, the scandal, my mom's, "You're just embarrassing us," my dad's silent gesture toward the door, and here I am on Merritt's couch, with a headache and a feeling of strange emptiness inside. "Good morning, fugitive." Merritt appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. "How did you sleep in your new place?" "Strange," I admitted honestly, accepting the hot cup. "I can't believe it happened." "I can imagine." I nodded, sitting down on the edge of the couch. "So what now?" "That's a good question." I took a sip of coffee to buy time. "What now?" Part of me wanted to go home, apologize to my parents, and get back to my normal life. But the other part, the part that had spoken last night about decisive action, demanded that I move on. "I don't know," I finally answered. "Maybe I should look for a place to live and talk to my boss about a possible promotion." "What about your parents?" Merritt asked, looking at me intently. Have they tried to contact you? I checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages. No, I think they're sure I'll come back with my tail between my legs. And will you? Merritt sounded worried. I wondered, do I want to go back? To a house where I was never accepted for who I am, where my dreams and desires were always considered silly and unimportant, where my mother controlled my every move and my father silently indulged her. No, I said firmly. I'm not going back. Merritt smiled. That's right. But you'll need money to get back on your feet. Money. I had some cash I'd been hiding from my parents, and a paycheck due at the end of the month, but it was barely enough for a down payment on a room. I have a little savings, I said. And I could pick up extra shifts at the call center. What about your account? Merritt asked. The one Grandma Esther opened? I shuddered. My grandmother had indeed opened an account for me when I was a child, depositing small amounts regularly. When she died, there was about $15,000 in the account, money she'd saved over the years, working as a school librarian and saving for everything. That money was for my education or the down payment on my own place. Mom is running it until my 25th birthday, I replied. It was my grandmother's will that I not spend the money on stupid things. Are you sure? Merritt squinted at me. Esther didn't trust your mother. She told me so. I froze. Grandmother and mother had never gotten along. Violet thought her mother-in-law was too soft and indulgent, and Esther disapproved of her daughter-in-law's parenting methods. But the thought of my mother manipulating my inheritance never crossed my mind. Do you think? I don't think anything, Merritt said quickly. It's just strange that Esther, who always talked about your independence, would make such an order. Maybe we should check it out. Check. Go to the bank and find out the terms of the will. It seemed reasonable. But suddenly another memory popped into my head a year ago, when I was helping my parents set up online banking. Merritt, I said slowly, I know the passwords to my parents' accounts. What? My friend took a break from her coffee. Last year, my mom asked me to help them set up online banking, said modern technology was for the young and they were too old-fashioned for all that. I signed them up, created logins and passwords. I don't think they've even changed them since. Merritt set her cup down on the table and looked at me carefully. What are you going to do about it? That's a good question. I knew the passwords to all of my parents' accounts, bank accounts, email accounts, even my Netflix account. Back then, it seemed normal to help with the technical side of things. But now, I could check to see if my mom was actually managing my account, I said cautiously, just to see if there were any strange transactions. Is there anything else you can do? Merritt asked, and there was an unusual note in her voice. What do you mean? Merritt shrugged her shoulders. They kicked you out on your birthday, after years of manipulation and control. Maybe it's time to teach them a lesson. I'd never heard Merritt talk like that before. She was usually the voice of reason that kept me from making impulsive decisions. What do you suggest? I asked, feeling a spark of curiosity ignite inside. Merritt smiled. Nothing illegal, of course, but say, what if their credit card suddenly stopped working? Just for a little while. Just so they could feel what it was like to be thrown out of your routine without warning. I swallowed. It wasn't right. It was petty. It was... Maybe, I said slowly. Online banking has a function to temporarily block the card in case of suspicious activity. You see? Merritt nodded. You could block them for a day or two and then unblock them. No real damage, just a minor inconvenience, just like you're experiencing now. I hesitated. Part of me, the part of me raised to be obedient and respectful of my parents, resisted the idea. But the other part, the part that had first rebelled against injustice yesterday, found the offer tempting. I need to think about it, I said, getting up from the couch. And check my own account. I'm going to go to the bank. Would you like me to come with you? Merritt offered. I shook my head. Thanks, but I have to do it myself. Besides, don't you have a shift today? Merritt looked at her watch and jumped up. Shit. You're right. I should get changed. Listen, the keys to the apartment are on the hook by the door. Take them if you need to go out. I'll be back by 5. Half an hour later, showered and changed into fresh clothes, I was walking toward the First National Bank of Cedar Lake. The sun was shining brightly, but I felt chilly, despite the warmth of May. Nerves, I guess. I'd never done anything like this before, defying my parents, finding out the truth about my money. The bank was housed in an old building with columns. Inside, it smelled like furniture polish and air-conditioned air. I walked up to the information desk, where an older woman with silver hair and glasses on a chain sat. "Good morning," I began. "I need information about an account opened in my name." "Of course, dear," the woman smiled. "Your name?" "Leona Paxson." The woman tapped on the keyboard, then frowned. I see an account in your name, but with restricted access. You'll need to speak to a manager. Please have a seat. I'll see if anyone's available." I sat down on the leather couch in the waiting area, nervously rubbing the strap of my bag. Was Merritt right? Had my mother been manipulating my inheritance all this time? "Miss Paxson?" a pleasant male voice called out. I looked up and saw a young man in his 30s in an impeccable suit. Tall, with reddish hair and freckles, he looked too friendly for a bank teller. "Yes, that's me," I answered, standing up. "Thorne Cadwallader, account manager." He introduced himself, extending his hand. "Come into my office where we can discuss your matter in confidence." I followed him into a small but cozy office overlooking the town square. Thorne motioned for me to sit down and opened a file on his computer. "So, Miss Paxson, you're interested in an account opened in your name by Esther Paxson?" "Yes, it's an account that my grandmother opened. I'd like to know its status and terms." Thorne frowned, looking at the monitor. It says here that the account is under the management of Violet Paxson until your 25th birthday. Is that your mother?" I nodded. "But I'm wondering if that was really my grandmother's directive, or if this change was made later." Thorne looked at me more closely. "Are you questioning the terms of the will?" I took a deep breath. "Yes. My grandmother didn't trust my mother very much, and I find it strange that she gave her control of my inheritance." The banker was silent for a while, then nodded. "I understand your concern. May I see your identification?" I held out my driver's license to him. He scrutinized it carefully, then turned back to the computer and started typing something. "Now, let's look at the history of this account." He fell silent, looking at the information. Then his eyebrows went up. "Interesting. What is it?" I asked nervously. Thorne shook his head. "The original account was indeed opened in your name, with the stipulation that you would have access to it when you reached the age of 21, not 25 as it's set up now, and the change was made." He checked the records, 3 months after your grandmother died. I felt like I'd been kicked in the butt. So Merritt was right. My mother changed the terms of the will. "Is that legal?" I asked, feeling my anger boiling up inside me. "Technically, yes," Thorne answered cautiously. "As your legal guardian at the time, she had the right to make the changes. But ethically—" He hesitated. "I shouldn't comment on that." "I understand," I nodded. "Can I get the account balance?" Thorne looked at the monitor again. "At the time of your grandmother's death, there were $15,243 in there. Now—" He paused. $2,870. I felt the room swim before my eyes. "What? How is that possible?" "There have been several large withdrawals in the last 4 years." Thorne looked through the transaction history. "All authorized by Violet Paxson. From the description, the money was for educational needs and medical expenses." "Educational needs? I dropped out of college 2 years ago, at the urging of my mother, who said we didn't have the money for my education. Medical expenses? I haven't been sick with anything serious since childhood." "Could I see a list of transactions?" I asked quietly. Thorne hesitated. "Technically, you don't have access to account management. But as the account holder, you're entitled to the information. I'll print you a statement for the last 4 years." A minute later, I had the printout in my hands, and what I saw made me choke with indignation. $4,000 for emergency dental treatment, the very month my mother had gotten new veneers. $3,000 for educational materials, when my father bought a new laptop. And the largest withdrawal, $5,000 for higher education specialist counseling, coincided with their Caribbean cruise last year. A cruise they didn't take me on because someone has to stay and watch the house. I looked up at Thorn. He was looking at me with undisguised sympathy. "What can I do?" I asked. "I mean, it's stealing." Thorn sighed. "Legally, it's a complicated case. Your mother has the right to manage the account until the deadline, but, he lowered his voice. "If you feel the money has been misused, you can apply for a renegotiation." "How long would that take?" "Months, maybe a year," he answered honestly. "And without proof of misuse, the chances are slim." I clutched the statement in my hands. I had proof that statement, but to use it, I had to hire a lawyer, and that meant money I didn't have. "I see." I nodded. "Thanks for the information." "There's something else," Thorn said, looking at the screen. "Your grandmother opened another account in your name. It's a small one, only $1,000. Your mother doesn't seem to know about it. It's not mentioned in the main documents. It was a sort of secret gift for emergencies." My heart ached. Grandmother. She had foreseen what might happen and had prepared a contingency for me. "And I can access that account?" "Yes," Thorn nodded. "You're 21 and the condition is met. I can process it right now if you'd like." "Please," I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. Half an hour later, I walked out of the bank with a bank card tied to an account my mother didn't know about and a heavy heart. My parents weren't just controlling me, they were stealing from me. Used the money my grandmother had set aside for my future for their own use. Lied to me for years. And I believed them when they told me we didn't have money for my college, for a rented apartment, for an independent life. I walked down the street, oblivious to my surroundings. My mind was spinning with scraps of conversations, situations that now took on new meaning. "You should be grateful for the roof over your head," my mother would say when I stuttered about moving. "We can't afford your education," she argued when I wanted to continue my studies. All the while, I had money. Money that could have changed my life. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, suddenly realizing I was standing in front of a cafe with free Wi-Fi. Merritt's suggestion came to mind. Block their cards. Show them what it's like to be robbed of your normal life without warning. "No, this is wrong," I thought. "It's petty and mean. And stealing from your own daughter is right?" asked another voice inside. I walked into the cafe, ordered a coffee, and sat at the far table with my laptop. My hands trembled slightly as I opened my parents' bank page. The login, the password, everything worked. I saw their accounts, credit cards, payment history, and a temporary card lock option. My finger hovered over the button. This is wrong, I thought again. But shouldn't they feel what it's like to have your life suddenly change out of your control? Didn't they deserve a lesson after all they'd done? I took a deep breath and hit the block button for both of my parents' credit cards. In the reason column, I selected suspicious activity. The system asked for confirmation. I paused for a second, then clicked confirm. Done. Their cards are blocked. Temporarily, of course, the bank would unlock them in a day or two, or when the parents called and confirmed that everything was fine. But it will be enough to make them feel the helplessness and confusion I felt standing on their doorstep yesterday with my backpack in my hands. I closed my laptop and finished my coffee. A strange feeling swept over me, a mixture of guilt and satisfaction. What had I done? Had I done the right thing? As I left the cafe, I pulled out my phone and saw a missed call from Thorn Cadwallader. Strange. Why would a banker call me personally? I called back. Thorn answered almost immediately. "Miss Paxson? Sorry to bother you, but I found something else in your grandmother's files. She left a letter that was supposed to be given to you when you turned 21. For some reason, it's still in the archives. If you don't mind, I could give it to you." "A letter from Grandma?" My heart started to race. "Yes, of course. I can be there in an hour." "I'll be waiting," Thorn answered. I put my phone in my pocket and headed back to the bank. Thorn was waiting for me at the entrance with an envelope in his hands. "Here," he said, holding it out to me. "This should have been given to you a year ago. Please accept my apologies for the bank's omission." I took the envelope, my fingers trembling. "Thank you," I whispered. "For everything." Thorn nodded. "If you need any more help with your finances, here's my card. Call me any time." I took the card and tucked it into my pocket, along with the envelope. The letter from my grandmother was my last connection to the person who truly loved me for who I was. I couldn't read it here on the street. It was too personal, too important. I walked back to Merritt's apartment, clutching the envelope tightly in my pocket. Contradictory emotions raged inside: anger at my parents for their betrayal, shame at my small act of revenge, longing for my grandmother, whose words I would soon read, and a strange new sense of freedom. I was no longer a helpless child dependent on parental favor. I had my own money, albeit a little. I had a choice for the first time in my life. What would my grandmother say in her letter? Would she approve of what I had done with my parents' cards? I don't think so. Esther was kind and understanding, but she believed in honesty and straightforwardness. "Never stoop to the level of those who hurt you, Leona," she often said. "Be better. Be stronger." But maybe sometimes you have to fight fire against fire? Maybe parents will never understand what it feels like to have control of their own lives taken away from them until they experience it themselves. I didn't know the answers to these questions, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could find them, on my own, without parental guidance or control, and the feeling was intoxicating. 3 days after locking up the cards, I sat in a small room I'd rented on the outskirts of Cedar Lake. Nothing fancy: a bed, a desk, a closet, and a nightstand, but it was my own space, my first truly independent life. Through the window, I could see an old maple tree, and beyond that, the rooftops of the neighboring houses. The room was on the second floor of a 2-story house owned by an elderly couple, Marjorie and Gilbert Ransom. They rented out the top floor to supplement their retirement. Marjorie, upon hearing my story, heavily edited of course, immediately agreed to rent me a room for a reasonable price. "A girl should have her own corner," she said as she showed me the house. "When I was your age, I'd already been married for 3 years and had a child, but times change." I settled on the edge of the bed and unfolded my grandmother's letter. I had reread it dozens of times over the days, each time finding new strength in it. "Dear Leona," Grandma wrote in her neat handwriting, "if you are reading this letter, it means I didn't get to live to see your 21st birthday. It's a pity. I wanted so much to see what a fine young woman you would become. But even now, when you are only 17, I see a strength in you that you don't realize yet. Leona, I know how hard it is for you to live with Violet and Eustace. I've seen how they crush your spirit, how they make you doubt yourself. Believe me, it's not your fault. You're a wonderful, smart, kind girl. They're the problem, not you. I set up the account for you that you know about. But I also set up this little secret fund that no one knows about but me and Mr. Fullerton at the bank. $1,000 isn't much, but it's enough to get you started. It's your emergency supply, your ticket to freedom, if you need to get away fast. Don't let them convince you that you're incapable of living on your own. You're stronger than you think. You'll get through this. And know that wherever I am proud of you and I love you. Your Grandma Esther." I folded the letter and returned it to the envelope. Grandma believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. She had foreseen that I might need an emergency exit and had prepared one. The phone vibrated, an incoming call from Merritt. "Hi," I said, answering it. "How are you?" "I'm fine," she said. "Your parents don't seem to be doing so well." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "They were at the post office today." Merritt was a postmistress and often went to the main office. "Your mother looked like she was ready to kill someone. They tried to pay the mortgage in cash, but they didn't have enough. They asked for an extension, but they were denied." I swallowed the lump in my throat. So the card blocking had really worked. 3 days ago, right after the bank, I'd blocked both their credit cards and my father's debit card. My mother still had a working debit card, but I knew she kept a minimal amount of money on it. The main money went to the credit cards because of the rewards programs. "Were they talking about me?" I asked. "Not directly. But I heard your mother say to the employee, 'There's some kind of misunderstanding. Our cards have suddenly been blocked. Someone obviously wants to hurt us.' I felt a pang of guilt. But then I remembered the bank statement showing how my parents had squandered the money my grandmother had saved for me over the years. I remembered all the humiliation, all the "you're not good enough," all the "be grateful for what you have." They deserve it, I said firmly. I think so too, Merritt agreed. But what's next? Are you going to unlock the cards? I sighed. Yes, soon. I just wanted them to understand what it's like to have your life suddenly spiral out of control. And when are you going to do that? Tonight, I've decided. But first I have some preparations to make. After talking to Merritt, I opened my laptop and started writing a letter to my parents. In it, I explained what I knew about the manipulation of my grandmother's inheritance. I attached scans of bank statements that clearly showed how they were spending my money for their own needs, explained that temporarily blocking the cards was my way of showing them what it was like to feel helpless. At the end of the letter, I laid out my terms for a future relationship. No surprise visits, no demands to come home, no control over my life, and full repayment of the stolen money, gradually, in small amounts, but every last dime. When I finished the letter, I printed it out at the nearest copy center, put it in an envelope along with copies of my bank statements. Then I sat down at my computer and unblocked my parents' cards, noting in the system that no suspicious activity was confirmed. In the evening, I went to my parents' house. I didn't intend to go inside, just drop the envelope in the mailbox and leave. But as I approached the house, I saw my mother furiously sweeping the porch. She looked gaunt and irritated. Violet froze when she saw me, then slowly lowered the broom. "So you decided to come back after all," she said with feigned indifference. "I knew it. Where have you been all these days?" "I'm not going back, Mom," I said calmly. "I've taken a room and started my own life." Violet snorted. "On your own? On your paycheck? How long will you last?" "As long as it takes." I handed her an envelope. "It's for you and Daddy. Read it carefully." Mother took the envelope with suspicion. "What is it?" "An explanation of what happened to your cards," I said bluntly. "And my money." Violet turned pale. You did something to our cards?" "Read the letter, Mother." I turned to leave. "Stop!" Violet exclaimed. "You can't just walk away. We're your parents. We have the right to—" "No, Mom." I turned around. "Not anymore. I'm 22 years old. I'm an adult. And now I decide for myself how to live my life." I walked away without looking back, feeling lighter with each step. There was the unknown ahead, but for the first time in my life, it was my unknown, my choice, my road. A week later, I came home from work and found a small box on the doorstep of my room. Inside was an envelope and a few of my childhood things, a photo album, a teddy bear my grandmother had given me, books I loved as a child. In the envelope was a check for $500 and a note written in my father's neat handwriting. "Leona, we got your letter. You're right about Grandma's money. This is the first installment of the refund. The rest will be paid monthly. We're not asking you to come back, but we'd like to see you once in a while. On your terms. Eustace and Violet." I reread the note several times. No apology, no admission of guilt. Typical of my parents. But the very fact that they'd agreed to make amends, that they recognized my terms, was more than I'd expected. In the evening, my mother called. I stared at the phone screen for a long time before answering. "Hi, Mom." "Leona," Violet's voice sounded uncertain. "Did you get our package?" "Yeah, thanks for the stuff. And the check." There was an awkward pause. "My father and I have discussed the situation," the mother finally said. "We don't agree with everything you wrote in the letter, but we recognize that we may have been too harsh." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from her. "Okay," I said, not knowing what else to add. "Your father suggested we get together on Sunday, have lunch together, at that cafe in the main square." Violet continued hurriedly. "If that's okay with you." I wondered, was I ready for this? Would I want to see them so soon? But then I remembered the words of my grandmother's letter. "You're stronger than you think." "Okay," I agreed. "At 1:00? "Yes." I could hear the relief in my mother's voice. 1:00. We said goodbye and I hung up the phone, feeling a strange mix of emotions. It wasn't reconciliation. Too much water had passed. Too much trust had been broken. But maybe it was the first step toward something new, toward a relationship based not on control and subordination, but on mutual respect. At 15 to 1 o'clock on Sunday, I stood in front of Martha's cafe, smoothing out the non-existent creases in my new blouse. I'd bought it yesterday, especially for this meeting navy blue, with a small pattern. Not too bright, so as not to annoy my mother, but not boring like the ones she usually approved of. My own style, my own choice. My parents were already waiting inside. I could see them through the window. My mother was tapping her fingers nervously on the table, my father studying the menu with exaggerated attention. They looked smaller than I remembered, less intimidating, just two not-so-young men waiting for their daughter for lunch. I took a deep breath and opened the cafe door. The bell jingled cheerfully, drawing attention. Violet looked up, and there was a range of emotions on her face: relief, uncertainty, something akin to pride. "Leona," she nodded. "You're right on time." "As always," my father added with a hint of a smile. I sat down across from them, feeling strange, like I'd met distant relatives I didn't know very well. There was an awkward pause. "You look good," my mother finally said. "That blouse, it looks good on you." I blinked in surprise. A compliment from Violet Paxson? That's new. "Thank you," I said. "I bought it yesterday." Another pause. The waitress brought the menu and we ordered. The conversation didn't flow, but it was a conversation. Not my mother's monologue, not my father's silent disapproval. We talked about the weather, about the new mall that had opened in Cedar Lake, about my job. "Tamsin offered me a promotion," I said, spreading butter on my bread. "A senior operator with the opportunity to train newbies." "Really?" Violet looked genuinely surprised. That's good." I waited for the usual criticism, something like, "Just don't think it's a big accomplishment," or "Let's see if you can do it." But my mother just sipped water from her glass and asked, "And when do you start your new duties?" "Next Monday," I replied, "with a 15% salary increase." "Congratulations," my father said abruptly. "You've always been responsible." I almost choked. A compliment from my father? 2 in 1 day is a record. Lunch went on, and it was getting a little easier by the minute. We were far from a normal family, from a warm, trusting relationship. But we talked. Really talked, not just exchanging orders and obedience. My mother even talked about problems at work, the first time in my memory that she spoke to me as an adult. When the bill came, my father insisted he would pay. "You invited us, but we insist," he said, pulling out his wallet. I noticed he paid with cash instead of a card. I wondered if it was an accident or if they were still afraid I might block their cards again. As we left the cafe, we stopped awkwardly on the sidewalk. "What now? Hug goodbye, shake hands, just nod?" "Maybe we could do it again in a couple weeks," Dad suggested, looking past me. "If that's okay with you." I nodded. "Yeah, I think that would be good." "And, Leona," Violet paused as if searching for words, "if you need anything, well, you know where to find us." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an admission of all the years of control and manipulation, but it was a beginning. The tentative, awkward beginning of something new. "Thank you, Mom," I said. "I know." We said goodbye, and I walked in the opposite direction, toward my rented room, toward my new life. I didn't know what the future would bring. Would we ever be able to fully overcome the past? Would my parents become the supportive, loving people I had always wanted them to be? Doubtful. But today showed me that change is possible. Small steps, gradual, but possible. I remembered the analogy of frozen assets. Our relationship, too, had been frozen for years. Cold, immobile, frozen in familiar roles. But now it seemed to be beginning to thaw. A slow, uncertain thaw, but a thaw. My grandmother's letter lay in my bag. I always carried it with me like a talisman. "You are stronger than you think," she wrote, and perhaps for the first time in my life I really believed it.